Do you want to know how to communicate your boundaries in a productive, positive, non-confrontational way, and most importantly, in a way where they're actually heard and listened to? Today, I'll be sharing a 4-step process that will completely change the way your boundary lands with others. But before I get into them, we should remind ourselves of something really important. What is the goal of setting boundaries? To put it succinctly, the goal of setting boundaries is to effectively take care of ourselves so that we can be there for other people. A boundary might look selfish in the moment. It is, after all, about me and my own self-care, but it actually turns out to be pro-relational, to be pro-relationship. The better job I do at taking care of myself, the more available I will be to you. On the other hand, when I don't do a good job at taking care of myself, I'll end up resentful, exhausted, overwhelmed, fatigued, and burnt out, which of course will negatively impact the people who I am in relationship with. So skillful boundaries improve both your individual well-being and your relationship's well-being. And now let's dive into the actual boundary setting communication guide. So your first step here is to identify your boundary to yourself. What is the thing that's disturbing me? What is the thing that I would like to see changed? What is the thing that I need to communicate so that I feel better? And if you're in a position where you know that you have boundaries, but you're just not sure what they are, refer back to that first boundary setting video and then come back here. So as an example, let's just say I've noticed that my wife isn't cleaning out the food that's in the cat bowls as quickly as I'd like her to, and I'm feeling some disturbance. Maybe I don't like the smell or the look of the food in the bowls or something like that. So that's what I've identified as my issue. That is the thing that I'm going to set a boundary around in the next steps. So that brings us to step number 2. I call step number 2 the critical internal shift, because initially just about all of us are going to be locked into a worldview where we're going to be automatically blaming the other person who we're about to set this boundary with. And when we're operating from this view, from this frame of reference, when we go to communicate our boundary, no matter how skillfully we do it, it's a recipe for disaster, because the person who we're communicating our boundary with is going to feel the implicit judgment that we are actually operating from. So the internal shift that is going to change everything for you is to recognize that this is my issue, not your issue. The other person who you're setting the boundary with, be it your friend, your family member, your partner, your colleague, somebody on the street, they're not wrong for being who they are. They're not wrong for doing the thing that they're doing. In fact, whatever they're doing makes perfect sense for them, given who they are and given their entire life history. If you were them, you would be doing the same thing as them. And it just so happens that in this area you've identified, they're triggering a disturbance in you. And so because that disturbance is inside of you, the issue, the fundamental location of the issue is you, not them. So when you're communicating your boundary, you're asking the other person to help you with your issue. So let's go back to the dirty, for me, cat bowls. My wife isn't wrong for leaving the cat food in them for maybe longer than I would. In her world, maybe the cats are gonna come and finish off the food later. But it just so happens that I find myself feeling disturbed by it. So what I'm about to do here in step number 3 is communicate my issue to my wife in the hopes that she'll work with me on finding a resolution that works for the both of us. So step number 3 is the actual act of communication. It's probably what you've been waiting for in this video. Now, before you just come to your partner and just share what's on your mind and just share your boundary, you're gonna wanna set the stage for the conversation. This is super simple, it's super short. It just sounds like, hey babe, there's something on my mind that I'd like to talk to you about, I'd like to ask you about. Is now an okay time for you? Or like my wife says, and she always manages to say it in a very sweet and inviting way, can I ask you something when you're available? This sets the stage for this being a collaborative process. When the person on the receiving end of your boundary feels included in the conversation and in the build-up to the conversation, the likelihood that your boundary lands with them, that they hear your boundary and respond to it in a helpful way, goes up astronomically. Now for the communication, for what we've all been waiting for. So remaining firmly entrenched in the view that this is a me issue, not a you issue, you voice your boundary. When you know exactly what your request is going to be, when you know exactly what your boundary is, then it might sound something like this. Hey babe, I was wondering if for my sake, you would be willing to do X, or you would be willing to not do Y. In my case, it might sound something like this. Hey babe, I was wondering if for my sake, you would be willing to put away the cat bowls once the cats are done eating. And then if it feels necessary, you might add something like this. By the way, this is totally my issue. I know that many other people might not have any problem with that whatsoever, but for some reason I do. So you would be helping me with my stuff here. You're not doing anything wrong. I just want to make that abundantly clear. And when you're not crystal clear about the behavioral change that you would like to see, but you're just vaguely aware that you would like something to be different, then your boundary might sound like this. Hey babe, I've noticed that I seem to have this issue with X. Totally my stuff, by the way. And I'm wondering if maybe we could brainstorm a solution around it, a different way to do X that would work for the both of us. Would you be open to that? Going back to my example, if I'm aware that the cat food, the cat bowls are disturbing me on some level, but I don't know what it is that I would like to be different, then my boundary might sound something like, hey Aşkım. Aşkım means babe in Turkish, by the way. Yes, my wife is Turkish. Hey Aşkım, I noticed that I have some disturbance or some irritation around the food being left in the cat bowls. Maybe it's the smell, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, I'm wondering, do you think we could work together to find a different way of handling the cat food and the cat bowls, something that might work better for each of us? And by the way, I'm using my partner as an example, but of course this boundary setting, this boundary communication exercise can be used with anybody. Maybe you would just leave out the hey babe part in the beginning. So we communicated our boundary. We found a way to put words to what it is that we were feeling inside, and we did it in such a way that was kind, that was skillful, and that was firmly entrenched in the view that this is my issue I'm asking for help on, not their issue. So let's move into step number 4, which is the aftermath of setting or voicing the boundary, which is essentially your partner's response or the other person's response and how to conclude the conversation. Now, some people don't like step number 3. Even if they get the agreement that they're seeking from the other person, they think that somehow it's not juicy enough, or it's too easy, or it's not fully representing the depth and the complexity of their feeling world. And they're right, it isn't. A boundary isn't about explaining all of your complex feelings to another person so that they understand you. That's not what a boundary is. A boundary is simply about efficiently taking care of yourself so that you don't build up resentment. It's purely behavioral, it doesn't get into the feeling world. I'm not saying don't talk about feelings with your partner, but probably don't bring them up when you're setting a boundary. Save those discussions for a different time when you have room for a longer conversation. My advice to you is to recognize that you probably won't feel understood, at least not fully. The other person heard you, they complied to your boundary, and hopefully you feel better than you did. Maybe you don't feel as good as you would like to feel, but perhaps that's okay for now. Now there's one other important piece here, which is what if the person says no? What if they don't agree to your boundary? What if my wife says to me, you know, this is actually the way I've always done it and it works for me and it works for the cats, so I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to change it. And so this brings me to another absolutely essential mindset, which is be ready to hear no. If you're not ready to hear no, don't even bother trying to set the boundary, because then you're going to be in some sort of controlling position. You're going to be trying to control the other person to get them to do what you want them to do. This other person, be it your partner, a family member, a friend, a coworker, somebody else, they're not here on this earth to be who you want them to be and how you want them to be. They're here on this earth to be themselves. So they're under no obligation to change their behavior in order to conform to your boundary. They may choose to. And if they do, then we obviously thank them and express gratitude, but they also may choose not to. So at this point, if that happens, then you've done your best to take care of yourself within the relationship. You've voiced what's on your mind, you've asked for a behavior, good job. And now you'll have to explore alternative ways of dealing with it. For me, maybe I'll have to explore other ways of increasing my distress tolerance so that I'm not disturbed by the smell or by the look of cat food. Maybe I move the bowls somewhere. Yes, maybe I can clean it out myself even though it makes me kind of want to vomit. There's all sorts of things that are potentially available to me. But importantly, I don't allow myself to get resentful and angry. I did what I could to explore a potential resolution to my issue with my partner. It didn't work, and so now I'm on the hook. It's up to me to find alternatives. So as you can see, so much of the boundary conversation is internal. In fact, only a small fraction of it takes place between the other person and myself. And those absolutely critical internal shifts are: you resist the temptation to blame. You actively remind yourself that this is your issue you're asking for help with. You're fully prepared to hear no. And you are fully prepared to feel some mild disappointment even if your boundary is agreed to. When you do all of that work, it will make these conversations so much easier. They won't be points of conflict. It will greatly improve the likelihood that your boundary is heard, respected, listened to, and agreed to. But even if it isn't, that's not the end of the world, because you're prepared to hear that now. Now, if you benefited from this video and you think that others might too, please go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe. That increases the chances that this video gets in front of other people who might also benefit from it. Thank you so much for your time. These 3 videos about boundaries should make you a fully qualified boundary expert. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to comment and ask them, or to reach out to me directly. Thank you, and see you in the next video.